Yeah, I guess it is.
I believe time for Noah. How much of the plot do we need to give away for Noah?
Well, I guess we can not worry about the spoilers about the ending, because I think most people are aware of the basic A to B of this story.
It would be nice, if we could talk this film through pretty much till its conclusion, really.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll save the ending till maybe the second half of the review.
Sure.
But so I think that we'll spare you the details. This is Darren Aronofsky's pet project. The guy's been working on it apparently since he was in high school. Actually, there's been a really nice story going around lately of him. I can't remember the state he had to go to, but he left New York to go find one of his old high school teachers that used to encourage him. I think she might have been his English teacher.
Okay.
Read the story a while ago,
Yep.
but one of the teachers that encouraged him in school and said you should keep on creating stories and so on. And he made sure that she had a prominent extra role in the film, and then he brought her to the premiere. And there's been a sort of underground sort of swell of appreciation for this woman, which has been kind of sweet.
That's very cool.
Darren Aronofsky, like most people would know him for Requiem for a Dream, most recently Black Swan, but then also The Wrestler, The Fountain, which you were trying to tell me after we recorded last week is well worth rewatching.
Oh, yes.
I'll have to give it a go because I literally love every single other movie he's made.
Yeah.
Pi as well. Pi is just a phenomenal debut.
I think a lot of people will be comparing Noah to The Fountain in coming weeks. As regards anything in his back catalogue that's similar to Noah, it's going to be The Fountain, I reckon.
Yeah. So Noah's been his pet project, but it's just, he always said it needs such a massive budget that he'll never properly be able to make this movie, and it took the Oscar success of Black Swan to actually have that confidence. I'm not sure what the final budget was. Was it maybe pushing... I'm thinking around 80-90 million, but I'm really not sure.
Actually, I think it was close to 130.
You serious?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
right.
That, I'm not confirming that, but in my mind, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
It wouldn't surprise me because this is easily the biggest film that Aronofsky's made to date. I mean, the scope of this is absolutely incredible. So there's been a huge amount of furor around Noah because Darren Aronofsky is Jewish. He grew up in Brooklyn. He's not. I don't think he's actually a very. I don't think he's a practicing.
No, I think he
Jew.
identifies as a non-believer. I don't think he's a very religious man at all.
Yeah, and those ideas do seem to come across in most of his early works, at least. There has been a hell of a lot of press, and we've been talking about it on the show, about the religious right that have tried to boycott this film. There was news from Paramount that they had tried 6 different cuts of this film, and they'd screened them to various religious leaders throughout the States, and no one was happy with them. This was all, Darren Aronofsky didn't even apparently know that this was happening at the time, and he was furious later on, but then the studio went back to him and said, you know what, we tried all these different versions, they don't work, no one's happy, so why don't you just go ahead and make the movie you've been trying to make anyway, which is lucky, because if he finally had all the funding, if you have a childhood dream of making a film, and then all of a sudden you've finally secured all the funding, you've worked for 20 years to get to this point, and then you turn around and the people backing you have just gone, actually, we tried to completely change it. Don't worry though, we'll give it back to you, it's fine. It didn't work out. Yep. So, kind of a nasty move on Paramount's behalf.
It's been quite unprecedented because Paramount have launched this advertising campaign to try and win back the Christian dollar, I guess. And there's been very strange sort of trailers and featurettes being released online that use testimonies from religious leaders around the world, like people that actually have managed to convince that like the film, and they've got them on the record to say how great Noah is. So they have these. I watched this featurette today where it was basically a thing about the film, and then there was about 5 minutes of just quotes, a black screen and white quotes from people that high standing in the Christian community that are recommending the film, and it was just bizarre to watch. I've never seen anything like this before. I mean, the last thing that really the last biblical film that upset the church-going community to this degree would have been Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ.
Sure.
And back then we didn't have any sort of correlation with YouTube or anything like that. What we have now.
Mel Gibson's film didn't.
Mel Gibson's film was so close to the text that it was embraced by almost every single Christian group around the world. Maybe not so much the Jewish groups, because it was a bit anti-Semitic, as
Mel Gibson. That's
crazy.
That's a story for another time.
Exactly. But I mean, the fact was, Passion of the Christ was such a juggernaut at the box office because it was the Christian groups went back to see it over and over and over again. They loved that film. Whereas this film, they object to it before they've even seen it because there's been these reports about Aronofsky twisting it into an environmentalist fable, and it's been bizarre because I've been following this because it's been fascinating. But at the end of the day, a lot of the information out there has been from people that haven't seen the film.
Yep.
And they've been recommending to their people that they should boycott the film and not give it their money because it's going to be a disaster, and they haven't seen it. So these opinions are pretty unfounded, which is a huge shame. And that's why I think Paramount has been working so hard to try and change people's expectations, because there's already been the battle's already been waged. They're trying to win back ground. It's really interesting to watch this all unfold.
It is, yeah.
And now finally the film's out, so hopefully the dialogue will change a little bit.
And there was about a month ago we got news that Paramount were putting a disclaimer in front of the film to say that this is just a creative interpretation of the story of Noah and his ark, and that it is it's purely fictitious. And so
that didn't happen here, did it?
No, it didn't.
Did it happen anywhere? Do they go through with that or not?
Well, they were apparently going to go through with it in the US. I guess I think we got it a day earlier because I literally have not seen a single word of opinion from anyone yet about Noah.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure the US will be getting it in about 24 hours from now. So I guess we'll find out if that actually came to pass. I'm really glad that they didn't put the disclaimer in front of that, because it is, I mean, this is clearly...
Well, it's a bit pandering, isn't it?
It really is, yeah, and it's completely unnecessary, because if anything, this movie goes so far out of the way to make it clear that they're... Basically, I think the most surprising thing about Noah is it's a fantasy movie. It's a sort of like a mythical fantasy, really. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was far more... I don't want to say far-fetched, but it's basically like they're requiring a hell of a lot of suspension of disbelief, because they're looking at the story, or Darren Aronofsky is looking at the story from a kind of a practical point of view, and saying that there is no literal way that the story could have happened the way it's been told in the Bible. So if it can't literally have happened, what is a way that it could possibly have happened? And then he's invented a world in which this could have happened. And yeah, I mean, that's a good jumping off point. Do you agree? Do you think it's a fantasy?
Yeah, I guess so. But I think he's I guess if you try and take literally what is said in the Bible, you're not going to have much screen time, because I actually went back and read Genesis chapters 6 through 9 this week, because I was curious about how close he was going to get to it. And yeah, even when I say chapters 6 through 9, it sounds like it's a bit, but it's not. It's a few paragraphs. The story of Noah is very scant in the Bible. So if you were to transplant that to the screen, it would maybe take 10 minutes of screen time. So of course you have to flesh it out a little bit.
It would just be the story of a man just calling out for animals, and then he lines them up, you know, 2 by 2 and marches them onto
What's hilarious about the story in the Bible is that even though there's not much, plot going on there is actually a very specific amount of time dedicated to God describing the measurements of the boat.
Oh,
which I thought was very strange. I don't know what
specific plans.
Yeah, I don't know what a cubit is, but it needs to be 20 cubits high and 15 cubits length and whatever. But he sort of lays it out as if it's a blueprint for a carpenter. Very strange. Anyway, but the actual story is over very quickly, and it's obviously very open to interpretation. While we're on the subject, though, of course, the story in the Bible, a lot of historians have sort of agreed at this point that it is based on an earlier fable from other cultures before Christianity sort of took hold. The Epic of Gilgamesh, I think, was the first telling of the Great Flood. But there are several cultures all over the world that have described a flood in one time or another. And, of course, Christianity had told their own story, and this is just one of those things. So of course it was an epic poem from a pagan community, then it was a Jewish story, and now it's mostly identified as a Christian story.
Well, it works
which is what Aronofsky's going for, of course.
Yeah, and it works beautifully as a parable. I mean, it's a very simple story, but it's one that's sort of epic in its simplicity, I guess. I don't know. It's a really grand, unique story, and it is kind of perplexing to I mean, yeah, all of this outrage has come basically from people that haven't seen it. But it is strange to think that a story that is so obviously fantastical in its nature, that you actually could be that upset by a creative interpretation of it.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'd wonder what they would be happy with. Some of these people that are causing all the fuss. You know, I'm not saying these people are representative of the entire religious community. It's just that these are the voices that we're hearing, unfortunately, because these are the ones that are making headlines, the people that are hating on it before actually seeing it. I was just thinking, before we, I know this is a very long preamble, Dave, but before we do jump straight into it, I have this, had this professor at uni, and, you know, in university, probably in schools as well, teachers aren't really supposed to share their politics with students because they don't want to influence them one way or the other. It's sort of just a basic rule in Australian schools that teachers should not reveal their politics.
Sure. And
I had this university professor that at the very first session of the school year sort of said, all right, this is the way it is, but unfortunately that's bullshit because no matter what I say to you, you're going to get influenced by which way I'm coming from anyway. Like, I can't stop telling you my point of view, even if I don't explicitly state it. So I'm going to just tell you right off the bat exactly who I vote for and why, and then we're just going to get on with the rest of the school year.
All right, okay. Right?
Which it really stuck in my mind. It was always a really interesting thing because we literally could put that aside and then focus on other things, and you didn't have to worry about it anymore. So in the spirit of that, I think we should lay our cards on the table faith-wise before we start discussing a biblical story, because otherwise, I mean, I think everyone's pretty aware of where we stand anyway, but just for the sake of the argument, where do you stand with faith?
Well, yeah, I think it's been fairly obvious. I am definitely a non-believer. Actually, no, that's not even true. I don't know. And I have always believed that it is arrogant to pretend to know, and even worse, to try and tell others what to know.
Okay.
I have no problem with people that are religious. That's fine. Everyone can, whatever you want to do, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else, is fine by me. I just don't see how, in an age where we have science to fall back on now. I understand we have only had that recently, so it's understandable that all these religions have developed. In today's age, I just don't understand why people can stand so adamantly behind these their religious beliefs when it is clear we don't know. I mean, there could be anything. There could be nothing. I have no idea, and I will happily throw my hands up in the air and say I don't know. And I think it is. Yeah, I just think it's unfair for people to just claim that they know. It also belies like a kind of brick wall type of thinking, like this. It's kind of you try and argue logic if you do have a religious person really come at you, which I find very irritating. They get to a point and then they just have to start pawning stuff off because they can't really. I mean, if you think about things logically, it doesn't really add up. Nothing really makes sense. Like I said, I don't want that to sound malicious. It's just that they don't know and I don't know. Why can't we all just? Life is a depressing idea. If you don't know, it's a miserable void. Maybe there's no meaning. That's fine. It's a horrible reality. I think it would be nice if everyone could just acknowledge that's the horrible reality of the situation.
All right, I wasn't expecting that.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you were pretty.
No, I know where you were coming from, but that's a very bleak outlook, sir. But fair enough.
Well, I think it's fair.
Am I to understand you're an agnostic then?
Well, I don't know.
Well, that sounds pretty agnostic.
It is agnostic.
You're sitting on the fence.
I'm definitely not an atheist.
Okay, fine. Well, for the record, I am an atheist, and but I do hear what you're saying, and so I just think it's important for us to just lay that on the table before we start looking very academically at a biblical story
Sure.
that's been transposed into a cinematic piece of work. I mean, this is an interpretation. This is an artistic interpretation, and I think it's going to be debated for quite a long time about how close to, I guess, Christian values that this story is, and how close to humanist values it can be. I mean, there's a lot going on here. So
sure. It's kind of like how we were talking about Need for Speed. We had to declare that we enjoyed Fast and Furious.
It's exactly like that. That's what's going on. Yeah,
very similar.
Got to get our credentials out there.
Yeah.
So of course we don't. We're not bearing any grudges here, but we do want to get to the bottom of this if we can. So without further ado,
okay.
How did you find Aronofsky's Noah?
I was phenomenally impressed.
Okay.
And I did not expect to be. And to be honest, for the first hour, I was not. Because it did, for me, have ignoring all the biblical stuff, treating it, maybe for the next 10 minutes, we can just treat it purely as a movie so we don't have to have all these associations tied in. Purely as a cinematic adventure, it had all the hallmarks of movies that I just can't get along with, like fantasy elements and, big rock monsters that talk in funny voices and things like that, which my brain just tends to switch off. I need things that are relatable to me, and I can't deal with... Basically, the problem I have with fantasy stuff is I find it hard to invest in the characters when that kind of stuff's happening, because I'm not sure of the rules of the world, like what is actually allowed to happen and what the stakes are. If something happens here, then what does it mean over there, and so on. I can't get my bearings in fantasy movies. Then I was surprised the more it developed, particularly when the Ark is actually being built and the flood comes, which the flood is an amazing sequence. Go back to that later. But the emotions it turns into almost like a family drama and a moral drama, really. And I just found it incredibly tense and incredibly emotional, and it really, really took me by surprise, because I was ready to write it off as like an interesting take on the Noah story, but just one that wasn't really for me because I can't get into that type of a film genre. But it really, there's a lot of the stuff with like with Emma Watson's character being barren, and then the
Methuselah?
Yeah, but the whole idea of like whether Noah should actually, I'm not sure how much we should give away. It's a bit hard. There are situations that characters are faced with in the second half of the movie that I found to be incredibly, overwhelmingly emotional, and that really took me by surprise.
Well, I think it's fair to say, because, as everyone knows, God brings the Great Flood to wipe out humanity, essentially, and Noah is there in charge to take care of the animals and, of course, to repopulate the earth after everyone's been killed. And the people on his boat are the only people that are going to be able to repopulate the earth. So, the presence of a barren woman is quite problematic, because that's not going to go anywhere.
But then in the film, it's also... I'm not very familiar with the Bible story at all. In the film, though, Noah believes that it is his duty to make sure that humans do not repopulate Earth.
Which I think is what a lot of the Christian groups and audiences have a problem with.
Right.
Because this was present in one of the original screenplays, which someone got their hands on, which is what most of these arguments on the internet have been about, is someone has read an early screenplay and attacked the film through that. But they have a problem with that, because in the biblical story, Noah is there with his sons, and they all have their wives with them, I believe. So they've all got some families to start as soon as it's over. There is no question about whether they won't repopulate.
So humans will prevail. This was just to cleanse the earth of the bad ones.
Yeah,
and
the
we'll
wickedness.
Start again.
Yeah, and it was also kind of a learning curve for God, it sounds like. The fact is, up until this point in the Old Testament, God was pretty malicious. Like, he took out his anger a lot on people, whereas after the story of the flood, God became a lot more generous and loving with his creation. And he says at the end of the story in the Bible that I will never, kill everyone on earth ever again, essentially.
Won't do that again.
Yeah, no more global genocide from me.
Right.
I'm done, guys. So that's basically it. And I think that's what Aronofsky and the writers and these guys making this film have tried to do, but through Noah, they've tried to make that sort of arc of wanting all humanity to be gone, and then trying to find some form of redemption, that there is good in man. Mm-hmm. And that opens up a lot of, it's a lot of huge questions going on here. And I guess I haven't got to really what I feel about the film. I'm almost on an opposite track with you, because I was really on board for the most part in the first half of the film. But I actually found the characters getting more and more detached from my emotional core as the film went on. And I've had a whole day to mull over this film, and I still can't really figure out what I feel. I know there are certain things that just blew my mind a little bit, that just because Aronofsky is such a visionary director, if I could use that cliched term. He is just
definitely
incredible.
For him. Yeah.
And to be able to see really famous sort of imagery from the Old Testament on a cinema screen, like, I've never seen anything like this before. There's a famous sort of scene that a lot of illustrators have depicted over the years of the sort of the last strands of humanity clinging to a rock in the flood, right? And when Aronofsky turns his hand to that, it is one of the most striking images I've ever seen.
That
whole
sequence, incredible.
Yeah, just amazing. And that's actually a pretty low key moment in the film. He manages to make so many things be so vibrant and beautiful, and sometimes only there for a few seconds, then he moves on to the next thing. But he manages to bring so much artistic imagery to this very short tale. and that sort of stuff that I can't get enough of. I love, but overall, I don't think the film really connected with me. I think the characters sort of stopped being characters for me as the film went on, and I stopped caring about their fates, and I stopped investing in them. I don't know why, to be honest. It didn't carry me all the way along, and I think I really wanted to be moved by the film, and I was early on, and I was with it, even with the introduction of the crazy rock angels, which was kind of weird.
It's a very startling... Because I don't think any of that imagery is really in the trailer. And I don't think anyone really expected this.
That was a huge thing. That was quite jarring because, yeah, we'd seen a few trailers leading up to this, and we knew it was going to be big and epic, and there was going to be a flood. But they managed to keep the huge angels out of the trailers and all the promotional material. I think they thought that would turn off the fantasy, as in people like you that don't enjoy fantasy films. They didn't want to suggest that it was that. So
yeah, it's a jarring moment when that happens too.
It's bizarre
because it's almost comical, and I think, at least in my point of view, it worked, and I was able to take it seriously. But the voices leave a little to be desired.
It felt a bit Lord of the Rings-ish.
It does, yeah.
Which I didn't expect nor want.
It's very jarring, just tonally. It's an odd move. I think it's a brave move.
Yeah.
But
well, here's the thing. Another point of contention with the Christian audiences are these angels. So
there were no rock monsters.
Well, they were, and that was one of the reasons that God wanted to wipe out the earth, because these fallen angels had started to copulate with the human women and had started to, the bloodline had started to get muddied, and humans could no longer be good. That God made them in His image because the angels were getting it was very weird.
Is that technically bestiality if a woman sleeps with a rock?
Well, no, because they're angels. I don't know. The fact is, the human race was getting sullied.
Right.
So that was one of the reasons that God brought the flood about. So in this film, the angels are actually cast as the good guys, and I think a lot of the more literal-minded Christian audiences are going to have a huge problem with that because they are traditionally kind of the bad guys. There's no redemption for these angels. They've risen up against God and they've been punished, and that's the end of the story. So that was a huge... Now, the reason I think that he went for this, because otherwise you've got a story where a man, like one sole human, and his family has been given a week to build an ark big enough to carry every animal species on Earth.
And they're all going to get along. They've got enough food.
Yeah. And that's a problem. It's very hard to transplant that to a film without someone saying, hang on a second, I don't think that's going to work. So having these rock angels actually build the ark for Noah, even though it's kind of crazy and out there, it makes a lot more sense than he does it on his own, right?
Oh, absolutely. As soon as that started happening, and it's not really a montage, but just a fairly quick sequence of events where these rock angels are...
We will help you, and they get to work.
It makes sense. And all of a sudden you think, well, that's... now I can see how... I mean... It's prefaced though with a scene where God, which is only ever referenced to as the Creator, where
that's true. They don't actually say God, do they?
Yeah. So where the Creator sprouts an entire forest of trees around Noah to send him the message that you will build an ark from timber. So it's.
I think I kind of, even though that was a very beautifully done scene, I kind of had an issue with the fact that it was confirmed so early on that God was in control there. I kind of would have liked the ambiguity of Noah maybe just being a crazy old man that thinks God's talking to him.
That's what I thought we were going to get. To be honest, I thought this might be taking the route of Take Shelter, which, I mean, a very different type of movie.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
But one where, there's an impending... I mean, one man is convinced that an impending disaster, it's looming, and he has to do what he can to save himself and his family. And it was they took a completely different road here, and it even has elements of magical elements in moments like that, which this movie, it doesn't just require suspension of disbelief, it's a mandatory element.
There are huge degrees of mysticism being involved in the plot, and I totally understand what you're saying before about the fantasy element, and that the way you described it actually made me realize for the first time why you don't get on with fantasy films, and that is an excellent point. I mean, you don't know the bound, you don't know all the rules of that world, so you don't know what's possible and what's not. It's an excellent point, and I had the same problem with this film. It took me a little while to get going because I was expecting it to be more of a gritty, realistic story, I guess.
Yeah.
Where I was surprised how much magic was involved early on. And as soon as I got in the flow of it, I was okay. But as I said, the characters, it all just started to guess I wear a bit thin for me. I mean, it's a 2.5-hour film almost. 2 hours, 20 minutes, is it?
Yeah, I got to say, the length didn't really bother me.
Okay.
I thought that it did. It was properly paced. I think maybe... Do you reckon one of the problems you might have had with it is that it does... In using this fantasy sort of guise, it conjures up almost like filmic cliches that it doesn't really need. Like it starts to have, and there's a huge battle. We have the villain. We have all these archetypes that we're used to in film, and it doesn't really seem like the story
a bit shoehorned
needs it.
in sometimes. I think that was one of my major problems, especially with the character of Tupac Kane, or I can't remember how to say his name. The Ray Winston character.
Yeah.
The perennial bad guy. I mean, he was there to fulfill a very filmic expectation the audience had, and I didn't like that at all. It felt just too forced. On that note, we haven't cut to a clip yet, so here is a little bit of Ray Winston as Tupac Kane, and of course Russell Crowe as Noah.
When I heard talk of miracles, I dismissed them. But then I saw the birds with my own eyes, and I had to come.
There isn't anything for you here.
No. This all belongs to me. This land, this forest, that stronghold of yours. Did you really think you could protect yourself from me in that?
It's not protection from you.
Then what is it?
An ark. To hold the innocent when the Creator sends his deluge to wipe out the wicked from this world.
Return to your cities of Cain. No, we have all been judged.
I have men at my back, and you stand alone and defy me? I'm not alone.
Very serious stuff there from the boys.
It is very serious stuff.
And as much as I enjoyed Winston's performance, yeah, I guess I just have a problem with that character. I saw it with my friend Leroy, and he was telling me after about how obvious that guy's dialogue was, and it's kind of unfortunate because being this sort of story, everything needs to be in pretty broad strokes. But yeah, he spends a lot of time, Winston's character, talking about how he is the man and man has dominion over animals. Very clear, obvious points that are throughout the story. But unfortunately, that's where a lot of his dialogue lies. It's very out there. It's signposted. There's not a lot of subtlety, which is a shame. I kind of crave a little bit more of that, I guess. A little bit more faith in the audience.
Yeah.
But that's just, yeah.
To be honest, I don't see why we need him in the movie at all. I don't understand why,
especially not after the flood.
I know, and that after the flood, when his character is still around, that is really those are the weakest moments in the movie, and it really is a shame because
I think that's where it lost me. Yeah,
it's just completely unnecessary. I mean, the focus throughout the entire film should be, and mostly is, about Noah and his family suffering the huge burden of whether to follow the Creator's orders and wipe themselves out and allow the animals to repopulate Earth, or to defy the Creator's orders and be ultimately selfish and risk another relapse of the Adam-Eve situation, which is... That's the most interesting part of the movie. It's not... The most interesting part isn't when the villain comes along with an army who try to fight them, and Noah, for a while, almost turns into a Batman kind of character where he's... It's one of those irritating things where just because he's the lead actor, the lead character in a movie...
He has to be a superhero as well.
Yeah, all of a sudden he's capable of taking down 10 guys in 2 seconds. Everyone surrounds him and he just twirls around and he's a ninja for a while. Yeah. And it is just... It's just wrong. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I can forgive it a lot of that because a lot of the action, just not action, a lot of the whole flood sequence is just... I don't know if you found it. I found it amazing when the actual flood kicks in and the arc, which is a very unconventional arc. Speaking of Batman, it's kind of like how the Tumbler was. Everything comes back to Batman in the end.
Of course.
It's kind of it's a conventional take on what is practical, not what is just appealing to the eye. So this is a mess of timber that looks like it should just sink to the ground, but it seems to work, and that's when the flood hits and it propels that up and above the water was just... I found that to be amazing.
Most of the epic action sequences are really, really well done in this film. My favourite moments are more the fantasy stuff where we're inside Noah's head and he's getting visions of the apocalypse, those sort of things. I mean, that's where the film really excels, I think. But yeah, I really enjoyed the flood sequence. I guess I think it just should have been shorter, and there just should have been a bit less of this sort of enforced chaos with the family unit and stuff. I just didn't care as much. Now, that's not to say that the performances aren't strong. I mean, like I said before, Ray Winston, solid. He always is. But this is a character that I think is really well suited to him, his sort of gruff style. And I really responded well to that. But what I was more surprised about is I really loved Russell Crowe and I really loved Emma Watson. Two actors that I can take or leave. In fact, Emma Watson has never really appealed to me at all.
She's never really had a chance outside of the Harry Potter.
This is true. I mean, I deeply disliked her in that Sofia Coppola film, which is the only other big post-Potter role she had. The Bling Ring, yeah.
She had a horrible character to play. I thought she did that very well.
Actually, that's a good point. She probably did do better than I'm giving her credit for. But yeah, I hated that film. So, or did I? Anyway, the point is, Emma Watson in this film is probably the best performance in it. I mean, she is so amazing, and she has to go through an entire range of emotions, of course. I mean, she's dealing with stuff that she, as an actor, has no idea about, and she manages to convey it as if she does. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to give away too much, but I mean, she's playing beyond her years.
Oh, for sure.
I did not think she was capable of that. She's really, really quite amazing. And Russell Crowe is an actor that I realise I've probably given him a bad rap in the past, just because he's got, unfortunately, that public profile that's quite, damaging.
Dick.
Yeah, he can be a dick.
He's just a dick. He throws phones, he yells
I mean, this
at
is
people.
probably, we're talking about him 10 years ago, but I mean, this is what people think of when they think of him.
Even just that stupid moment where a British journalist had asked him why he sounded Irish in the Robin Hood movie, and then Russell Crowe went on for ages saying he's got dead ears. You got dead ears, mate, and then hanging up, and he has, unfortunately, I guess when you're in the public eye the whole time, if you let your personality slip for a second, then that's going to be what people will remember you for. But yeah, he's a dick.
But he's
generally,
yeah, sure. But his personal life aside, I feel he's an actor that's generally really matured into each role. I mean, you look back at his early roles like Romper Stomper, and then later on where he broke out with LA Confidential. I mean, he was a hungry actor and really willing to do anything. And he's got a lot of vitality in those early roles. And now he's gone through a period where he's been a bit hit and miss. But this sort of stuff, he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he can convey that. I mean, I really just loved watching him in this film. I didn't expect to do that at all, but I thought he was a really powerful presence.
He's fantastic, yeah. And you're right, because he went through a variety of roles. There was one of the first films he did, the name escapes me. It was a small Australian film where he had to play a gay character who had a really bigoted dad, and he had to. It was basically about the struggles between them and between him trying to come to terms with his sexuality.
Okay.
Really unusual performance if you put that alongside what he's been doing lately.
Yeah.
He's a phenomenal actor. I mean, when I say he's a dick, I just mean that's what we see of him in the public. He might be a nice guy with a temper. I don't know. But
I think he's probably a pretty straight shooter sort of guy that didn't really gel well with the paparazzi nature of Hollywood when he got there.
Sure.
And he probably couldn't understand why he never had a moment's peace, and he lashed out, and it was caught on camera, and that's sort of what we think of him now.
And to be honest, that's generally the kind of celebrity I like, is the one that doesn't go along with. It's just you could, when that kind of that forceful personality doesn't gel so well. Like a lot of the time, it comes off as just nastiness and not just an inability to deal with people. Regardless of that, though, he's incredibly good in the movie. What about Logan Lerman? I mean, the two sons in this film are. I don't. It's weird to say that this is like a Hollywood stereotype, because in a lot of ways this isn't really a conventional Hollywood movie. I mean, Aronofsky's never really made a conventional Hollywood movie, but
I think he's still yet to make one.
Yeah, and he probably never will, which is a good thing. I mean, he came close to Batman. Here we go again. But these two sons do seem remarkably good looking and a little bit devoid. I mean, they're fine.
One of them, I think, might be a woman. He's so beautiful.
He was just such a good looking man.
Now, I don't know, these characters, I think this is once again back to my problem. Like, I didn't feel that those characters were well formed, and I just didn't really care. And
I did care for Logan Lerman's character.
So which one's that? Sorry,
he was the younger one.
Okay, so he wanted the wife.
Yes, the one that required, not required, that desired a wife,
Yeah, okay. No, I guess that all that subplot just didn't really work for me, and I just kind of wanted it. I guess I was just craving a bit more of a stripped down story. I just wanted to get to the point and because the point was enough to sustain the film. Like, the ideas in this story are huge, and they are universal, and that's all you really need. I felt that most of the family stuff was filler, and I didn't care for it.
Right, okay. I felt completely the opposite. The family stuff was the stuff that worked the most for me.
Okay.
And the rest of the stuff I was kind of trying to rest into something that was manageable for me to
No,
make...
Fair enough.
To make work.
Did you have any thoughts about the story of creation sequence?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
It's just, this is, actually, that's something we haven't mentioned yet. Aronofsky's got a definite, really obvious way of working with visuals and really fast edits and telling a story, telling a kind of like a mini story, a story within a story very quickly and with just such unique visuals. And this is just perfect. He's absolutely the right guy. He's kind of, everything that he does sort of feels almost like LSD influenced in a lot of ways, like going back to Requiem for a Dream, that older kind of drug sequences, not that that was LSD based, but, but just that he has a very lurid way of dealing with...
and if anyone's going to make fun of him, they're going to reference the quick cuts that he uses in Requiem for Dream to simulate the drug taking, the heroin taking experience. The whole the cooking and the shooting up, and it's anyone that's seen that film will know exactly what I'm talking about. The sort of thing.
Yeah.
And people have riffed on that for years. And it's funny because you almost get a bit of a throwback to that in this film where it comes to the snake and the apple, and he retells the Garden of Eden sequence a few times because it's rattling around in poor Noah's brain. And that sort of stuff I just love. But yeah, the actual, the point where Noah sits down and tells his family the story of creation, it was one of the best things I've seen on a cinema screen for years.
It is
that was the high point of the film for me. Now, obviously, once again, a very literally minded Christian audience is going to take umbrage to this because it does very cheekily manage to weave in
evolution.
Yeah, a pretty accepted theory of evolution, but he uses the pretty much the exact words from the Bible to tell over the story, the images you're seeing of evolution. So I can understand why people are going to take offense to that, but I thought it was really nice because. Okay, I'm going to get personal here again, because as you do with these sort of things, I guess when I was a child trying to get my head around the idea of religion and stuff, and I remember asking my mother about how can God do this and this? I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. And she said something along the lines of, look, most of these things are stories to represent an idea. I can't remember how young I was, but she was trying to explain that it might not actually be fact, but it gives you an idea about this. And I love the way that Aronofsky is very, very sort of honorably tied in the text from the Bible into a sort of a modern viewpoint on how science works in the world today. It's a really interesting marriage. I mean, some people might call this intelligent design. I don't think so. I think it's more about the artistic nature of how he's married these two ideas. But as a cinematic sequence, it's mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah. But you're right. It perfectly combines the ideas of creationism and evolution into a single sequence, because it's basically saying... God or the creator created this scenario and this situation, and he said, let there be light, and it was good, and they are using a lot of stuff verbatim out of the Bible, and then you're right, kind of cheekily, it then as it moves into Earth and then starts showing an animal, or starts showing the water and an animal evolving out of the water and then into into a small kind of creature, almost like a lizard type thing, and it starts getting bigger and bigger. But not only, I mean, the way that's done, I feel like in the hands of any other director, not only has he just within 20 seconds just jumped from the idea that God created the Earth to now it's evolution, which is, I guess the two do go hand in hand. I mean, that was a situation created and then evolution evolved from that. But in the hands of anyone else, it could feel like a really cheesy, really fluid kind of thing, where this is really almost like obnoxious in the way it's really grating. Like it's not so much shots as it is almost like photo lapse, like time lapse kind of stuff that's edited together so quickly.
It feels like there could be 1,000 shots there in a few seconds. Like, it's amazing.
And you're missing little bits, just enough to kind of throw you off kilter until you end up towards the end of the sequence. It's just
and there is
mind-blowing.
an earlier sequence in the film which I also really loved, where I can't remember how it starts, but I think there's some water in the ground. I think Noah does this is very vague, but does something with a pool of water, and then we follow a stream of water that goes through mountains and across territories and across deserts, and we're just following this stream of water as it spreads across the land. And the same sort of thing. You've got these series of almost like a photo image gallery, just rapidly changing every millisecond, and that was just beautiful as well. And watching, I love all these sort of flair that Aronofsky brings to it is just so mind blowing. Yeah,
it's funny because he's managed to retain all of that while putting it. This actually does feel like a film that's compromised, like it's torn between two worlds. It's trying to please the heroes versus villains, and then it's trying to retain that sort of really unique style that people have sort of not mocked but mimicked for a lot of the, I mean, even like Edgar Wright has pinched a lot from Darren Aronofsky. Sure. I'm sure Aronofsky's not the first one to edit things together quickly in a way like that, but it's become kind of a trademark of his. So he's got all this Aronofsky stuff in it, but then it also, there's all this bombastic good versus evil, and I'm not sure
I think he genuinely loves the story. I think he really cares for it, and he wants to do it justice, I guess, but he also needs to tell a cohesive story that does make sense. And unfortunately, if he adapts the Bible verbatim, it's not going to make any sense, and audiences will be dissatisfied. So I can totally understand why he's gone to these lengths to make it a cohesive script. And I don't think it always works. I think it's actually a very flawed film, but there are moments of brilliance. And
and you're right, you can feel the passion through the screen. I mean, it's obviously a guy that spent a lot of time with the story, and remarkably, you can feel that it is not you're not being lectured to or preached to by a religious director. It feels very much not non-biased, but I mean, like you said with your teacher, that he's basically come out and said straight away, I do not believe in this. I just believe that it is a very inspiring story, and there's a lot to be taken from this story. I don't know. I mean, I am really torn. I was blown away in during a lot of the film, and then other parts of it, I'm not so sure. I like him best when he's dealing with smaller, more personal, intimate stories, but it's interesting to see a director like that do something huge, because it's not very often we get a guy with such a singular vision who's being given so much money to do something like this.
Absolutely, I think this is more or less like a lot of what The Fountain would have looked like if he was given the budget he was promised in the first place. Like, he had to make a lot of compromises when he made The Fountain because the money just dried up and disappeared. Everyone lost faith in the project, and he still made a really amazing film, but it is lacking somewhat because he doesn't have the money to do the sequences he wants. So to see, I'm going to stick with my figure of 130 million. To see a blockbuster like this seem like done through the lens of such a visionary man is a real treat, and I think we're all really lucky to see it. I'm still not as in love with it as you are. I think you are enjoying it more than I did.
I don't know. I'm not even sure. I mean, I just saw it. I don't know whether.
Yeah, fair enough. So we got two very conflicted opinions. I'm sorry, guys. We can't give you a definitive answer, but.
Well, I think that kind of sums up. That sums up what I expect the public opinion to be is going to be. Everyone is going to bring to it their own personal baggage, which doesn't happen a lot of the time with mainstream movies. Generally, they're just made to kind of please a broad audience.
That's true.
This is really this way, and why we at the beginning of the review had to say what we feel. Everyone's going to bring a lot of stuff to this movie, and I'm not entirely. It's going to be one of the most polarized and probably the most talked about movie of the year, I would guess.
I hope so. Anyway, I mean, considering the blacklisting he's had from certain groups, I really hope that the film can rise above that, and people can still make this a success, because this has been banned in most Islamic countries.
Yeah.
So he's going to lose a lot of market there as well. I mean, it seems to be that the forces of evil are conspiring to just damn this film into nothingness, because no huge group wants to see it. I mean, atheists are the only group left that have no real qualm either way, and they're not going to be interested in seeing a Bible story. So
I know
it's going to be interesting to see how this film goes.
I have mentioned this to a few people during the week, and most of them just expressed disgust that I was going to see it.
Really? Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they understand that that's what we do on the show. So there's not much of a choice most of the time. But if you have even a remote interest in storytelling, or a remote interest in,
that's what it comes down to, I think.
Yeah. It's just you don't need to feel like it's something that's trying to attack you personally, because this is not propaganda. This is not religious propaganda. It's simply an interpretation of one of the oldest stories of all time. Yeah,
exactly.
It's well worth seeing, and it's well worth making your own mind up about. I think it's, at least we could agree that it's at least interesting, if not good or bad, or somewhere in the middle.
Oh, it's exceedingly interesting. I think, I'm going to stick with my theory that it's got a lot of flaws, but it's how can I put this? I think it's a noble failure, I'm going to say, because I didn't work for me like I wanted it to, but I still have many images swirling around in my brain from this film that I can't stop thinking about.
Would you actually go so far to call it a failure, though? No,
a noble failure, yeah. It didn't work for me. I mean, I lost my connection to the characters. So on that level, on a very basic humanist level, I stopped caring about it. But I wished I didn't. I really wanted to care, and it just didn't take me all the way there, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, I know what you mean, because I was feeling that for a lot of the movie, and it did click in at some point, but I was worried that it wouldn't. So, yeah.
All right. So that's Noah, Darren Aronofsky's Noah, and we'll finish up the show now. So also out this week, we've got The Raid 2.